you, everybody. Welcome to the regular Board of Education meeting. Today is Monday, July 13th. And if you just bear with me, I just want to read the Open Public Meeting Statement. In accordance with the requirements of the Open Public Meeting Act, Chapter 231, PL 1975 announcement, I wish to announce that the New Jersey Open Public Meeting Law was enacted to ensure the right of the public to have advance notice of and to attend meetings of public bodies at which any business affecting their interest is discussed or acted upon. In accordance with the provisions of this Act, the School Districts of the Chatham's Board of Education has caused notice of this meeting to be published by having the date, time, place thereof posted in the Board Administrative Offices, sent to the clerks of the Chathams of the Chatham Borough, Chatham Township, the Library of the Chathams, the Chatham Courier, the Daily Record, the Star Ledger, and the TAP. Mr. Tequila, would you mind taking roll call?
Here. Mr. Arnick. Ms. Ciccarelli? Here. Ms. Clark? Here. Ms. Kenny? Here. Mr. Ryan? Here. Mr. Smith? Here. Mr. Valenti? Here. And Ms. Weber?
Here.
8 present and accounted for.
Thank you. If you're able, can you stand and join us for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, everybody. In the interest of time, I'm going to skip my president's comments for now and pass it right over to Dr. LaSousa for the superintendent report.
All right, thank you, Ms. Weber. I'll start off by acknowledging the event that took place in Chatham on Saturday, which was the Black Lives for Chatham Solidarity Rally. I wasn't there, but I did watch the video from it. And it was difficult to watch and listen to the comments from some of the folks who spoke on Saturday. And of course, I think it is important to acknowledge that the overall, if not one of the primary purposes of the event, was to further the eradication of racism in our community and other communities, but beginning with our community. And within the context of our community stands the school district. And much of the discussion on that day centered on how the school district should and could become more anti-racist and more committed to teaching students and empowering students to address issues of racial injustice and social injustice. So I want to state up front in this meeting that this school district remains committed to engaging in that work. This school district will be receptive to the voices of students who perceive a mismatch between our stated principles as a school district, principles that strive to create inclusivity here and equity and respect and deep learning. And when there's a mismatch, then we need to engage in conversations that may be uncomfortable or difficult to have and that may be prolonged, but that's part of what we have to do as an educational institution. No student in this school district should ever feel less human than any other student for any reason, including because of their race or their ethnicity or place of origin or sexual orientation or any other reason. So I just want to make that clear up front. I'll have more comments to provide as the public commentary gets underway in a few minutes, but wanted to say that up front. The second item, of course, that I will touch on is the reopening of the schools. I sent an update a couple of weeks ago about the intentions of the school district after many weeks of meetings with subcommittees of the Board of Education, our leadership team, and others. Needless to say, this is a shifting and changing landscape, both in New Jersey and nationally, in terms of what's happening relative to COVID-19. We continue to work through all of the details of the various plans that we at least have kind of sketched out from a framework perspective, having students in school every day on an abbreviated schedule, Plan A. Plan B, having students in on a cohort model where not all students are coming in every day. And then Plan C, of course, would be full virtual instruction. our guiding principles are that students belong in schools, and that being online can't fully replicate the experience that students have when they're in schools with their classmates, with their teachers. So our goal aligns with the American Academy of Pediatrics' goal of having all students in school every day. And what we need to do is figure out how to do that in as safe a way as possible. I did speak with one of our health department officials today, who expressed a lot of support for our thinking, at least to this point, acknowledging that conditions could change. He reminded me that it's impossible to eliminate all risk in this type of situation, and that we have to try to layer protections upon protections so that we can resume school in a way that's responsible. So we're working through that. I don't have a lot of additional details beyond those that I shared just before the 4th of July holiday. But we hope to continue to make progress and reach a point by the end of this month where we can share more detail and more elaborate elements of the plans that we're coming up with now. So those are the two big topics for me, Ms. Weber.
Okay, thank you. And moving over to Peter.
On very briefly on the construction update, the contractor finished the abatement on Saturday, so the construction contractor started work today. So, I'm sorry, on the middle school nurse's restroom, the abatement was finished and all clear given on Saturday. So drill construction started their work today and should be completed in plenty of time. We'll keep you updated as we start the meetings. On the auditorium, all of the punch list items are in process of being corrected. Due to a production error, the grills that go on the mezzanine are now being fabricated, and they'll get installed as soon as they're done. And they claim that the project should be 100% done by middle of August and ready for students when we come back to school in August 31st. And the only other note is the 3 incumbents that are up for election have completed their packets, which will be sent to the county tomorrow, and that is for the borough, Ms. Weber and Mr. Ryan, and for the township, Mr. Smith. That's all I have.
Yes, and just a reminder, the packets are not due until July 27th, and they can be found online, which is where I found ours. I don't know. Sorry, my leg is bleeding. That's why Matt's looking at me funny. So just as a reminder, those packets are due, but they have to be at the clerk's office by the 27th of July. At 4 p.m., thank you. Okay.
Association of Pediatrics, whatever that was.
I have one.
Where is the CDC on this? Are they giving out guidelines on top of that?
The CDC guidelines have not changed yet that I'm aware of.
Are they in line with the American Association of Pediatrics, whatever that was?
The primary difference between the two is that the CDC guidelines ask schools to strive for 6 feet of physical distancing.
Okay.
For students to be in face
Right.
coverings and take other procedures if you can't get to 6 feet. The American Academy of Pediatrics sets the number at 3 feet and similarly says face coverings at 3 feet is a good set of protections.
Okay, so that's the main difference.
I'm sure there are others, but off the top of my head, that's the main difference that I can think of
Okay,
now.
and we're clearly just focusing on the guidelines established by those professional organizations. There's no politicians trying to edge their way into this somehow and get anything from their personal side.
No,
From a
not
political
that
fight,
I.
right? So it's been pretty good about them staying out of this and just letting us deal with the professional organizations?
Well, the state of New Jersey left a lot of discretion to school districts and really left it up to the local, each local board of education to determine how best to proceed. That's causing a lot of confusion and inconsistency across the state right now, which is probably going to continue for the next month until school districts announce their plans, and you'll see many, many different types of schedules. In the NJDOE guidance, they essentially ask districts to aim for 6 feet of distance, but then consider numerous other measures to mitigate virus transmission if 6 feet of distancing is not possible. So I've been telling some folks, we have 3 and 4 year olds who have diapering needs. You can't physically distance and change a diaper. That's not going to happen. You have first graders who are 6 years old and just learning how to read and just getting used to school, physical distancing is just not going to happen with a group of first graders. So acknowledging that, the DOE has guidance that says school districts should strive for 6 feet of social distancing, but if that's not possible, consider face coverings, plexiglass dividers on tables like this, if 6 feet is not possible between me and Peter. Facing all of the seats in the same direction so that there's only one, flow of air and there's not people staring at each other like this. So we're permitted to implement all kinds of transmission, mitigation strategies in order to arrive at a safe environment. And that's what we should be dialoguing with our local health departments about.
Okay. And then secondly, if you look at it from the perspective of, there's been a lot of articles in the paper of recent and other behind the scenes discussions talking about the faculty itself. So when will we be, in essence, secure / solidified in terms of our plan for the teachers, what the teachers, I'm sure they have to sign up as to whether or not they want to come in or not. So what is the time frame? Do we have a monument or a time frame in line right now to say we want to have this figured out by August 1st, so we understand what our staffing profile looks like? There's been talk in the paper that we're not going to have enough teachers, and there's a lot of stuff going on at the union level. So at what point do we have anything in mind that's saying we want to have our plan solidified with our teachers by X date? And
Yep. The day before I sent the email out to parents, I sent one to staff. I've been meeting regularly with the 2 presidents of the Teachers Association to talk about issues. That's an ongoing conversation. I don't think it's going to end. We just had a personnel committee meeting where we discussed this, and the number of staff members who are inquiring about leaves because they have concerns over an underlying health condition or their age or some other factor. We don't have a hard and fast date, except that we really are aiming for August 1st to notify all parties of what the plans will be, so that there's a little bit of time in between when the announcement is made and when school actually begins. I suspect, as many others do, that when school districts begin to declare what they're doing, there will be widespread leaves of absence taken among teaching staff because there is no uniform schedule that's being imposed over all of the school districts in New Jersey. So some districts will be in, half days, morning and afternoon. Others will be in every day. Others will be in every other day. Others will be in every third day. And it will create a big childcare problem for many of the staff members in all districts.
And then last, but not least, outside of what you said before, but have we been able to monitor or have been able to figure out anything from a mental health perspective from the kids missing school for those 3 months, or what are we doing to prepare ourselves as kids come back to either identify kids who may have had some mental health issues that were new to them? What can we put in place in order to kind of bring kids back to a normalized level as best possible? Have we done anything from that perspective?
We're working on that. Ms. Chase has been working with some of our other team members on social and emotional health and well-being, and what we will be doing to try to transition kids back into school since they've been out for so long. I can't tell you that I have any, packaged answers to give you right now about that, but that's very much one of the key priorities when we reintegrate students into school, especially when we all look like this.
Stand on the PPE acquisition?
So that's a great question. How do we stand on PPE?
Like the nurses, which is a step up, and students? And teachers, all of it, okay.
The only item that's been essentially impossible to get are fitted N95 masks. That we have gotten some, but we do not have a limitless supply of those, and they will be reserved for our nurses' offices, and we will try to secure more as we get into the year, if we're fortunate enough to get far into the year. We have already a hand sanitizer and wipes for every classroom in the district. We are in the process of ordering masks for staff. We're going to get masks that we can keep on hand for students in case a mask breaks or a mask gets soiled while at school. We are in the process of ordering a face shield for every staff member and every student. And a face shield is not a substitute for a face covering, but it's another layer of protection. And if a student has difficulty wearing a mask because they have asthma or they have another condition that prevents them from keeping the mask on for long periods of time, the face shield can be helpful, at least in one of those layers of protection. We have been stocking up on additional disinfection materials, both in terms of application and in terms of the substances themselves. Part of the benefit of going to an abbreviated schedule is that it not only reduces lunch, which is a big time drain for all of our custodial staff, but it gives more time for the custodial staff to come in and hit every classroom and bathroom and common place so that they can disinfect as many surfaces as they can throughout the day. I'm trying to think of what else. We do have contactless thermometers. We do not plan at this time to try to take the temperature of every student and every staff member who comes in the morning. We think it will just be too time consuming and not feasible. So I'm just thinking of other PPE. I think that's most of it.
Have you actually ordered everything? Or is there an issue with the supplies actually coming in? I mean, I guess I just want to make sure that we're ready, because I've heard issues with supply chain.
Yes. We're ordering everything as fast as we can. A lot of the stuff, I'd say, doesn't have a big delay with supply. This is not PPE, but the plexiglass dividers for tables and desks and things like that, which we are going to order a good bit of, that has some lead time. But there are many, many vendors out there right now that are on the hunt for business. So we have a meeting Wednesday morning. John Cataldo and Peter and Karen Leister and a few other folks about all of these kinds of items, and we're trying to order as much as we can as early as we can so that it's here in time for the year.
Can I ask a question about the temperature? So obviously, not checking students and staff. Are students and staff going to be required to self-report prior to entering the building through a database or something?
That's what we are trying to figure out right now. So there are many apps that are also being circulated for that purpose. If we can, we would rather probably try to use Genesis and the parent portal because it's something that people are comfortable with, and it'll give us a centralized location for that. But we are still, our technology staff is still working through what the best option is.
And Mike, you had also talked about students having the option, if they don't feel well on a given day, even though they had indicated they were going to be in-school learners, they can that day, we want the students to have the flexibility to be remote learners for a day or two or three until they feel better. So
Yes.
it's not so rigid that you lock in and you're an in-school learner or you're an out-of-school learner. There might be some fluidness there. If they're not feeling well, stay home, no problem, watch it online, and we'll follow up as a remote learner.
Yes, we want to be able to accommodate students who are feeling ill and exhibiting symptoms because, and I may have mentioned this last meeting, I can't remember, but, years past, you'd send your children to school if they didn't have a fever, let's say. In some cases, we had parents giving their children Tylenol in the morning just so that they could get through school. And of course, none of that was as big of a concern as it is this year. So we want to make sure that if students have to stay home for a day, 2, 3, because they are sick with something else unrelated to COVID, they feel okay doing that and that they still are able to keep pace with the rest of the class.
Any additional questions or comments for Mike? Okay, and like Mike, I also watched, 2 hours of Saturday's events. I just want to reserve my comments until after the public commentary, make sure everybody has a chance to speak. So I'm just going to jump over to committee reports and get through some of these reports so we can get right to it. Anne, would you mind speaking about personnel?
Sure, no problem. We met just before this meeting and discussed, as Mike had mentioned, any of the teacher leaves or any teachers that have already expressed that they may not feel comfortable coming back to school given the circumstances. We also talked about making sure that any substitute teachers that may be coming in are prepared for the environment that, you know, obviously it's going to be a different environment than it has been in the past. Ms. Chase touched on the fact that new teacher orientation, which they have started earlier than normal because of the fact that it is all virtual, is in full swing, and all new teachers, new hires thus far have been contacted by the district, and they're starting to get acclimated with the schools and, you know, various procedures and other people in the district as well, and, you know, preparing them for if we do down the road need to go back online, knowing that they know what the policies are. And that's pretty much it. Dr. LaSouza will touch on a few other personnel items later, but, and I don't know when our next meeting is. My guess is probably sooner rather than later.
Yeah, we may have to call impromptu committee meetings as the needs arise, as the direction from the state changes daily. Curriculum, Ms. Kenny, any meetings?
Yes, we've met twice since our last meeting. The first meeting was to discuss the school reopening strategy. In addition to the committee members, Dr. D'Elia was also attended so he could advocate for the considerations of the special education community. The second meeting we had was to discuss race within our curriculum. In addition to the committee members, Heather Rocco, the supervisor for ELA, gave us an extensive overview of the reading materials offered in the K-12, grades K-12. And then Stephen Mayer also spoke with us regarding the social studies program, and he gave us an in-depth review of the curriculum there. We are inviting them to give the public a presentation at an open curriculum meeting in either August or September. And that was the.
Hopefully we can arrange that sooner than later, depending on people's availability. Matt, finance and facilities?
We haven't met since our last meeting, and we probably won't meet until we get our state aid figures in August.
And you still anticipate that, Matt, in August?
Yeah. Unfortunately late, but yes, in August.
Yes, we will probably, I'll be sending out notices for additional committee meetings at some point this week, so that
Okay. And we could do those through Zoom, so we don't have to physically be here.
Yep.
We all felt strongly about being physically here for public Board of Ed meetings, but if we have to do committee meetings over Zoom, we'll do that. So we just have to meet more than usual. And everybody is amenable to that. Policy and planning, Mr. Ryan.
We met on the 30th, continued to discuss reopening plans, and we have 3 first readings of policies on the agenda tonight. One is related to additional family leave for people that need that due to COVID. Another one discusses religion in schools, and not religion course, but the exercise of religion if students need time to pray or whatever they might need to do. And then there's a heat participation policy for student athletes. It's first reading. All 3 are on the agenda tonight.
Excellent. Thanks, Mike. Any questions for Mike on any of that? Mike Ryan on any of that? Does anybody have any liaison reports? No?
The only one, Mike, or Pete, on this will be with the fact that we've now established the guidelines for high school sports. It's going to be the, in essence, working with the town recreation for what that means for youth sports in terms of whether or not they need to follow the exact same guidelines as high school as to what their start dates are. I don't know what youth football has to be in line with high school football. Just got to make sure that we have everything in line from that perspective for the youth program. I also don't know whether or not if the season's pushed back, if we're going to need the lights potentially for either practice or whatever, just because the season, I think, ends later this year than it generally does.
So, Matt, just to clarify, we're bound by the NJSIAA.
But the rec is not.
Rec is not. So
Right.
You're not looking for direction from...
No, well, no, I'm saying we need to understand, because they're going to use our fields, so we need to understand what their
availability are?
not as availability, but what are the restrictions that they have to make sure that we're in line in terms of the use of our fields with any kind of state guidelines or whatever,
Okay.
whoever's going to create those guidelines. I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know how they're going to differentiate youth sports, basically K through 8 as I look at it versus high school. But just, that's the only thing I can think of from a recreation standpoint.
Okay, thank you. And for the Chatham Performing Arts Booster, I just want to acknowledge a donation of just over $7,000. I don't know if it's in the agenda or not, but it's $7,000 for 8 trumpets, 8 trombones, 15 floor markers to assist with social distancing, 1 sonar beat glockenspiel for the MS Milton Avenue School students, which is like a xylophone, but it's metal instead of wood. 16-inch 5 violin violas for Mr. Keller. A Metrodome tuner with remote for Mr. Keller. 140 new folders for the 6th and 7th grade band, and 21-inch Apple iMac and 2 microphones to help with video and editing. So I just want to say thank you to the Chatham Performing Arts Boosters for all of those donations. So thank you. That's fantastic.
Any notice of the donation? If you'd like to do an audible when it comes to finance and add that as agenda item B14, we can do that. I'll just need the details in order to write it up.
Okay, B what? I'm sorry, Peter.
It will be
Thank you.
B14 when Matt does it, because I was not given notice about that donation, so we will be able to accept it tonight.
Okay, I'll leave it right here.
Thank you.
B14. Entered into submission. Any additional liaison reports? No? Okay, very good. I'd like to make a motion to pass the minutes of June 22nd public session.
Second.
Peter, does anybody have to abstain? No. All those in favor? Opposed? No abstentions?
Duly noted, passes 8-0.
Excellent, thank you. So we have our first opportunity for public commentary. I'm going to read the notice, but if you would just hang on a moment before you come up to the mic, because I received a handful in email that I would like to read first. This way, the folks in the room won't be interrupted and they can take the microphone from there. So just a notice, hearing of the citizens during a public commentary section of the agenda is an opportunity for any member of the public to be heard about issues which are or are not topics scheduled for the current meeting. To help facilitate an orderly meeting and to permit all to be heard, speakers will be asked to limit their comments to a reasonable length of time. And just a reminder, this is an opportunity for public comments. The board will not be interrupting. It won't be a back and forth. Typically, if you've not been to a meeting before, public commentaries, we try and watch the time. I assume if you could just show of hands, not that you're committed, who's looking to speak? Okay, perfect. So it just gives us a general sense of time, and you're not committed in either direction. If something hits you that you want to speak about, feel free to speak up. So we'll try and limit it to 5 or so minutes if we can. Or how about this, as long as the longest email that I'm about to read you. So if you would just bear with me. So the first one was received Sunday, June 28th, by Paul Craig. Members of the Board of Education, I strongly urge that you focus the district on not only the physical questions of COVID, but also a focus on improving at-home instruction. While I understand and agree with all of the logistical needs discussed at the June 22nd meeting, I believe that there should be more focus on the quality and nature of at-home learning. As discussed by Dr. LaSousa, there's certainty that in meaningful portions of the 2021 academic year needs to be managed via online learning. It's understandable that in March 2020, online education was a subpar experience compared to in-person learning. Everything from teaching methods to curricula to internet-based platforms were understandably geared toward in-classroom-led learning. When making decisions for the 2019-20 year, all of those decisions were correct. For 2021, I strongly urge the board to focus significantly on improving educational discussions for at-home learning. Please direct our administrators to specifically consider and report to the board on teaching methods, curricula, online platforms to maximize the quality and engagement of at-home students in quarantine. I suggest that there be a premium placed on the quality video teaching. Specifically, the administration should consider whether multiple sessions of the same class would benefit from identifying one teacher to create video for all sections with the other teachers responsible for responding to students, grading, etc. In some ways, this would be similar to a college class with a lecturer and teaching assistants. This is also one of the initial promises of distant learning when the new platforms were developed. The promise of Blackboard and MOOC, Massive Open Online Courses. Separately, some of the curriculum decisions last year were predicated on in-classroom engagement between teachers, students, and between teachers, students, and between students. References specifically made to some of the middle school math curriculum decisions where there was very little written teaching materials. Instead, there were high volumes of workbook problems with no guidance on what the directed method to solve should be. These programs are very poorly suited to an environment when students are isolated at home. They become generators of busy work only. Finally, Google Classroom, in particular, seems to be a pretty poor way to organize teaching materials compared to other platforms. At a minimum, I would suggest common resources for the teachers to better understand how to organize and use the online platforms and to have consistency for the students. It was disturbing to see how different teach was. I'm reading it specifically. I'm reading it as it's written. Very challenging for middle school kids to have to navigate so many different online experiences. It's the planning phase for 2021. Discussions of temperature checks, PPE, separation in the hallways, etc. are all warranted. That being said, it's clear that all of our students will be required to do at-home learning. I strongly suggest that addressing those issues and gaps should be top priority for 2021. I ask that this be read at the public record at the next school board executive session. I'm reading it at the public session. We're not having an executive session. The next email is from, and I apologize, Laura Friedenfields. As a PhD historian and Chatham parent, I would like to speak in support of changes to the social studies curriculum designed to integrate the stories and voices of Black Americans throughout our social studies of American history and culture, and to robustly address the social and political structures that have led to racial injustice. Our students deserve a social studies education that draws upon the enormous and superb scholarship produced in all of these areas over the past few decades, and that prepares them to be critical and knowledgeable thinkers that college professors demand. Social studies supervisor Steve Mayer and many teachers have made significant progress in this direction in recent years, and their continuing efforts should be maximally supported. As the Chatham for Black Lives petition suggests, the district should consider employing a consultant who specializes in this aspect of curriculum development to support Mr. Mayer and our teachers' efforts. If I can be of help, I am also happy to offer pro bono assistance. Thank you. Ann, I'm going to take you up on reading one of these. Sure. Thank you. In fact, I'm going to give it to you now, just because I'm going to be parched by the end of it. Thanks. Could you give that to Ann? Matt, thank you. Okay. Next one is from Julie Kohlhaus. Dear members of the board, after attending the BLM rally at our train station yesterday, I was shocked by my ignorance of basic African American history. I'm a 56-year-old Caucasian female, born and raised in Wisconsin, now living in New Jersey for more than 20 years. I only recently learned about Juneteenth. As a Wisconsin native, I am in no way claiming that glaring lack of attention, much less inclusion and integration of curriculum, to be solely nor uniquely New Jersey public school issue. I do think, however, that New Jersey, the school districts of the Chathams in particular, has a responsibility to do better. As a taxpayer in a high-tax community, I expect at least the essentials to be taught. A fully integrated history curriculum is that bare minimum. I prioritize this curriculum expansion above anything else at this time, teaching Black history in culturally responsive ways. There's a link here. Thank you for your attention to this core curriculum concern. Sincerely, Julie. And then just to read them in the order, that one came in next, and then I'll read the last two. Yep. Thank you.
You got it. To the Chatham School Board, I am Dr. Rosella G. Clyde. I live at 33 Carmine Street in the borough. I'm Educational Director of Kaleidoscope Educational Consultants, LLC, and a lifelong social studies educator. I taught in the New York City Public Schools for 42 of my 44 years connected to the classroom. I am the Education Director for the Morristown Area League of Women Voters and serve on the League of Women Voters New Jersey Education Committee. I'm also a member of the New Jersey Council for the Social Studies and of the NJEA. I serve on the Chatham Borough Environmental Commission and am chair of the Chatham Borough Green Team among other local affiliations. I'm speaking now personally, not as a representative of any of these organizations, but as an educator. My PhD is in instructional design for online learning. I only bring up those affiliations to support the perspectives from which I speak. I represent the New Jersey League of Women Voters at all state Board of Education meetings, so I am schooled in New Jersey curricular matters. I attended the Black Lives Matter teach-in on Saturday, July 11th, and heard firsthand about experiences young people of color have lived through in the Chatham School District. These stories affirmed my experiences while teaching in New York City public schools. Our society maintains a systematic fear of black and brown bodies. That is why juries validate police officers' defenses that they, quote, feared for their lives, and why white women call police complaining that black people sharing public space with them are a threat to them. Systematic racism is a threat to black and brown lives. We do not need to play a, quote, blame game about this situation, but we also cannot kick the can down the road any longer. We heard graphically this past Saturday about the impact systematic racism has had on the lives of young people here in Chatham. There is something the Chatham School District can do to rectify this situation. The School District of the Chathams can recognize that systematic institutional racism exists and can commit themselves to initiating changes beginning here and now. The state legislature has mandated that all curricula K through 12 in New Jersey be supportive of, quote, climate change. Treat people with disabilities and LGBTQ individuals with respect, recognizing their accomplishments across the curricula. Many residents of New Jersey thought that we had dealt with racism 50 years ago. We did actually elect a black president twice. The white backlash that has allowed racism to thrive and flourish during the past 3.5 years is once again permeating our airwaves and our very existence. This virus is every bit as debilitating and dangerous as COVID-19. We have taken extreme measures to combat the rampant onslaught of COVID-19. We also need extreme measures to combat the killing impact of systematic racism here in Chatham. We can examine ourselves, our own attitudes, our own shortcomings, acknowledge areas where we have felt fear, and address those fears. But we can also find ways to trust and amplify the voices of people of color as they explain the impact that our policies and practices have had on their lives. These attitudes of fear, anxiety, superiority, and privilege are deeply embedded in the ways we deal with all students. Schools have begun addressing bullying behaviors. We have to continue those examinations, but racial privilege is an enormous iceberg. The roots of oppression go deep into our cultural behaviors and expectations. It is not just the curriculum that needs to be examined. We must examine the policies and the way we apply them. Justice can be divided into 3 major categories. There is corrective justice, which includes the way we approach behaviors we deem to be detrimental to individuals and societies. In the general population, these practices include our police, courts, and penal institutions. In the schools, these practices involve our school suspensions and corrective measures. There is procedural justice, which includes the way we develop policies and practices, and there is administrative justice, which includes the way we carry out those policies and practices. I encourage the School District of the Chathams to approach the upcoming discussions about racial privilege, and for that matter, all other areas of privilege, from all 3 of these justice perspectives. This is only the beginning of the conversation, but it is a conversation that needs to take place over time and across constituencies. It begins by organizing groups of stakeholders, listening first to their experiences, gathering those experiences together, and developing new policies that mitigate the disparate impacts that have emerged from those discussions. These stakeholder discussions may be conducted virtually and can begin as you begin to address how you will handle instruction this fall. As you discuss ways to mitigate the dangers of COVID-19, you can also use that opportunity to discuss how you can mitigate the dangers of privilege here in the areas of life over which you have some degree of control. As Dr. Okekor Ari Price so eloquently explained on Saturday, we can choose to be a savior, an ally, or a co-conspirator. I choose to be a co-conspirator, listening to, valuing, and affirming the voices of our youth who are living within the academic environment created by the School District of the Chathams. We cannot correct all of the wrongs, but we can stop making the same mistakes over and over again. It is time to change the climate before that climate ends up killing all of us. Thank you for providing an opportunity to hear my voice, Rosella Clyde.
Thank you, Ann. I appreciate it. I just have 3 more. They're fairly short. Thank you for your help, Ann. The next one is from Laura Jones. Hello, I hope this finds you safe and well, and thank you for all you're doing to serve our students. We appreciate the thorough approach laid out by Dr. LaSousa for the return to school plan as it stands for September. There are many families at the elementary school who are in a unique position of having half-day kindergarten next year and not knowing what the implications of a Plan A/early dismissal are on the schedule. I believe that we have a right to be told as soon as possible if we are expected to have anything less than half a day that is already provided, so that we can make accommodations if necessary. Realizing that everything is up in the air at this point, it would be at least great to know the Plan A/Plan B scenarios, as all the other families in district have been told for planning purposes. When do we expect to know more details? Laura Jones. I have two more. This is from Joe Bazaralian. Dear Board of Education members, as a parent, I support the Chatham for Black Lives agenda to strengthen our school district. The agenda, if adopted, will powerfully support our mission as a district to grow and empower our youth as well-informed and critical thinkers, responsible members of the community, and as active practitioners of kindness. Over the past 5 years, I have dedicated a fairly significant amount of time to issues raised in the petition. I strongly believe there is extensive intellectual and experimental justification for each of the points raised. I urge everyone in the community to keep an open mind and to commit to learning more about the reasons behind each of the recommendations. For people with little background on the topic, I suggest these two excellent books, although there are truly vast literatures available: White Fragility by Robin DiAngelo and How to Be an Anti-Racist by Abraham X. Kendi. If it would be helpful, I would be honored to join others in volunteering in any capacity I can to assist the district in strengthening itself along the lines of the Chatham Black Lives agenda. While I am by no means a professional in the field of racial justice and equality, I feel it is important for you to know that parents are ready to actively, that's capitalized, support the district in making such positive enhancements to our children's education and well-being. Respectfully yours, Joe Bazaralian. And the last one that I received before I walked in the door around 6 o'clock was from Abigail Lowe. I am writing because I support the demands being read at tonight's Board of Education meeting. I believe the school district of the Chathams must make these changes to support our BIPOC community. The district fails to recognize and strive for racial justice. As a Chatham High School alumni, I demand that the district agrees to protect, amplify, and respect BIPOC voices. With great frustration, Abigail Lowe, class of 2018. I did not receive any after that. Mike, could you just double check? I don't get service in here, so that was the last one I got.
I have a couple more. Should I read them?
Do you mind?
Yeah, no, not at all.
I don't have them. Thank you.
This one is from Karen Swartz, and she writes, President Weber, Dr. LaSousa, and board members, thank you for the extraordinary lengths at all levels you and all subcommittees are going to in order to reopen at the end of summer. My question regards our health officers / health departments, which, as many residents may not know, differ between the township and the borough. Given that we have schools in both the township and the borough, but assuming our health officers take direction from the New Jersey Department of Health, are we in contact with both? Is there a chance that our respective health officers may have different strategies or recommendations? Thank you again for your time and dedication. Respectfully, Karen Swartz. And then one from Christopher Maurer. One of the topics raised at the BLM rally on Saturday was the makeup of the faculty and administration within the school district. The statistic raised was that the Chatham teacher faculty was 7% minority, with only 0.9% being black. How is the school district going to address this? If we want our children to succeed in a diverse world, we need to foster a more inclusive educational system. To me, that means starting at the top with the administration and faculty. Families of color need to be assured that their children will be educated in a warm and friendly environment where people of all races are welcomed. And one more. Tess Kolker. Hello, I am emailing to express my support for the demands put forth by the coalition behind Chatham for Black Lives. As a Chatham High School graduate, I fully endorse these demands and believe that it is your duty as the Board of Education to implement these demands to the best of your ability in order to create an anti-racist community in this very white, very privileged town. Our school district received $42 million from 2017-18, more than the average New Jersey school district. It is your responsibility to use this obscene amount of money wisely and in the best interest of your students. Right now, based on your actions, you are not acting in our students' best interests, and it is time for that to change. Once again, I strongly urge you to implement these demands.
That's it, right, Mike?
Yes.
Thank you. So thank you for your patience. I apologize to those in the room. If you wouldn't mind just coming up and introducing yourself into the microphone, any public comments, so the floor is yours. We're going to probably shut our mics off and just be listeners right now. But thank you for your patience. I really appreciate it.
Hi, my name is Joe Lang. I did send a letter to Dr. LaSousa that he did not read. Let me start by saying last Friday I received a copy of these demands, and I took a look through them, and I wrote this to other people in Chatham that I know. I said, "Dear Chathamites, this document was forwarded to me. I find it frightening that so many recent graduates of Chatham High School are seduced by the Black Lives Matter movement that was founded and is guided by professional Marxists. It says a lot about what they must be learning in our schools and at the colleges that they attend. It is obvious that they are not taught the full story about our founding documents and their drafters. They are taught much nonsense about how terrible and racist we are as a nation. They are made to feel guilty about the color of their skin. They are not taught about the steps that we have taken as a nation to right the wrongs of the past, and how the current difficulties of life in our inner cities are the direct result of misguided policies that have undermined family life in these communities and created what is seeming a seemingly permanent underclass dependent on government subsidies for survival. I doubt that there are many people in Chatham who do not believe, as I do, that Black lives matter. But they do not matter simply because they are black, but because they are human beings deserving of the same treatment as other citizens. These young people present their statements as a list of demands. That demonstrates an attitude that reflects the sense of entitlement that has been allowed to develop among much of today's youth. Too many of them have led overly protected lives, not given the opportunity to fail and learn that failure is a part of life, and that learning from failure is an important part of the maturation process that we all must experience. Then as I read through this document, I realized that these young people, no matter how well-intentioned, have been fed a lot of propaganda during their schooling and has blinded them to the realities of life. Unfortunately, this phenomenon exists far beyond Chatham, as can be seen in what has been happening nationally. It has caused a deeper breach in our society than has existed since the darkest days of Jim Crow. It threatens our very way of life. The Black Lives Matter organization is not truly concerned with black lives, rather with reordering society along socialist fascist lines, the very way it has failed wherever it has been tried, whether it be in the Soviet Union, Nazi Germany, Cuba, Venezuela, or the many countries of Eastern Europe. Again, too many of our youth are unaware of the truth about what the history of these nations is. They do not realize what a butcher Stalin was, or what an evil and masochistic killer Che Guevara was, to cite a few examples. In addition, many are uninformed about things as basic as what our three branches of government are, or who we fought against in our war for independence, even why we had that conflict and when it occurred. If BLM really cared about black lives, they would try to find ways to end the senseless killings of black residents in cities like Chicago, Baltimore, St. Louis, etc., by other black residents, and these are many times the number of black individuals killed by policemen, most of whom are the sole defense for inner city residents against complete chaos and anarchy. Certainly defunding or eliminating police forces is not an answer to the killings that plague our inner cities. I've gone on longer than I had planned when I started writing this. Please do read through what is below, and if you agree with my reaction, please forward it and my comments to others in the community who are probably unaware of what is evolving in Chatham. More importantly, make your feelings known to the superintendent of schools as well as the members of the Board of Education. Well, I made my feelings known to Dr. L'Souza, which he did not read. Maybe you didn't receive it.
I did not receive any email from you.
Well, I'll read it to you right now. Dear Dr. L'Souza, I had forwarded to me the letter at the bottom of this email. That was the petition, or list of demands. My letter is my reaction to the letter is expressed in the message below, which is what I just read. I trust that you'll understand that there are many people in our two towns who are disturbed by both the tone and content of the message that was sent to you. Hopefully there will be more who will reach out to you to express their distress with the set of circumstances that has produced so many uninformed youngsters filled with naivete and lack of respect for our great nation. There is no valid reason for any of them to feel any dismay about their skin color, nor should they have been brought to believe that the only meaningful parts of our history are the negatives, when they should have been taught, what they should have been taught is that American exceptionalism has enabled this nation to meaningfully address its shortcomings and to do a better job of bringing up the standards of living for not only our citizens, but also for millions of people throughout the world. There is no country on earth that more foreigners want to emigrate to than the United States of America, and there are a multitude of reasons for that, about which our younger generations seem to be unaware. Too many parents for too long have accepted what their children have been receiving in the way of instruction in our schools. To the extent that it is possible, I intend to do what I can to open up the eyes of our citizens of our two towns to the need for each of them to become more involved in understanding of what is being taught in our schools. It will be interesting to see what the reaction of you and the members of the Board of Education will be to these, quote, demands, unquote. I would hope that you will call upon community involvement in addressing any of these issues that have been highlighted in their letter, and that you will make the writers aware that you do not accede to their demands, but that you are open to discussing their concerns with input from the community at large. And I've done a little bit more talking to people and trying to understand things. Can I ask a question? Is Howard Zinn's...
Mr. Lyons, I mean, you can ask and just put it on the record, and we'll address everything at the end.
Well,
We're not going to go back and forth, sorry.
okay, but I just want to know if the People's History of the United States by Howard Zinn is used as a textbook in this community.
And we're going to cover all of that at the end, sorry.
Okay, I
Thanks.
might have another comment later.
Okay.
Oh, sure.
Past meetings where that was actually discussed. And just for the record, we don't read COVID has kind of forced us into an odd meeting situation. We only read public comments where people have specifically asked that their comments be read publicly. We receive dozens of emails, and they're not meant to be read publicly, so I just don't want people to think that every time they send us an email, we're going to read it to the public. It's only those that have specifically said, please read this during a public commentary.
I wasn't aware that that was the rule.
This is all new to us.
It's new to me, too.
Hi, everyone. My name is Alexis Williams, and I'm a member of the CHS class of 2019. I'm one of the uninformed youngsters. Dr. LaSousa, School District of the Chatham Administrators and Chatham Board of Education. We, a group of Chatham High School alumni youth organizers with the support of Black Lives Matter Morristown, Wind of the Spirit, and Chatham community members, present to the School District of the Chatham's Board of Education a set of demands that will move us forward in acknowledging, undoing, repairing, and preventing harm caused by the district to all of its students via the negligent teaching of Black, Indigenous, person of color, and non-Western voices and histories. Our demands are as follows. Institute anti-racism training in all School District of the Chatham schools at all levels for both teachers and students. In a community that is predominantly white and privileged, racism is pervasive, and anti-racism discourse is rare. It's impossible to unlearn and dismantle systems of white supremacy without a proper understanding of where, why, and how racism exists in Chatham, New Jersey, and the United States, both presently and historically. We demand that the district, from this point on, makes a constant effort to address, unlearn, and unteach racism and anti-Blackness. Anti-racism training would teach both teachers and students in all grade levels what it means to be compassionate, thoughtful, and determined supporters of racial justice. We recommend that the school district carry out this step by connecting with EDU Sage Companion Consulting. We also recommend professional development workshops for administrators and educators through the People's Institute for Survival and Beyond, specifically their Undoing Racism Community Organizing Workshop, the Center for Racial Justice and Education, the Racial Equity Institute, and Teaching Intolerance.
My name is Eleanor Franklin, and I'm a member of the CHS class of 2019. Our second demand is for the school district to implement thorough and complete curricula reform to shift instruction towards anti-racism. Anti-racism training alone is not enough. We demand that the district integrates not only anti-racist texts and histories into its K-12 curriculums, but also the stories and voices so often ignored by the canon of education. We, again, recommend EduSage Companion Consulting. According to founder Dr. Okaikor Ayu Price, it is an anti-racist and equity-based company that helps schools and organizations shift towards anti-racism and can support curriculum transformation and professional development. The Board of Education and Dr. LaSousa may believe that Chatham schools are not a part of the problem because the curriculum never explicitly or overtly advocates for racial inequity. For example, the history curriculum never endorses the KKK, and teachers don't side with the notoriously racist Bob Ewell of To Kill a Mockingbird. However, harm is actively being done in other ways. To quote Black liberation leader Angela Davis, "In a racist society, it is not enough to be non-racist. We must be anti-racist." By remaining race neutral, Chatham schools perpetuate a pre-existing racial hierarchy of education in which Black histories are neglected. Curriculum reform could include creating a separate class on the history and evolution of Black oppression, in a similar fashion to the Holocaust course required at Chatham Middle School. Further, we demand that teachers of all subjects and all grade levels incorporate more discussion of historical Black figures in their fields, i.e. Black authors in English, liberation and movement leaders in history, and scientists, mathematicians, computer scientists, and innovators in STEM courses. Teachers should use primary sources from Black voices, authors, leaders, scientists, historians, writers, filmmakers, and artists to tell these stories. Non-Black teachers should be uplifting Black leaders who are already telling their stories, rather than attempting to relay the sentiments of these people through their non-Black lens. We further demand that teachers immediately cease using or reading the N-word when it appears in texts, and demand they cease encouraging students to say it in the classroom. The normalization of this word in educational context further contributes to systemic oppression of Black people, creates an unsafe and unwelcoming environment for Black students, and teaches non-Black students that the word is acceptable for their use in academic settings or when permitted by an authority figure. This issue has been raised by a current CHS student as well, Campbell Reagans, whose petition to stop Chatham teachers from saying the N-word received 291 signatures.
My name is Julia Eckert, and I'm a member of the CHS class of 2019. Our third demand for the school district is to reform hiring practices to include more teachers and administrators who are Black, Indigenous, and people of color. According to the 2018 to 2019 New Jersey School Performance Report, in Chatham, 100% of administrators were white, 93.6% of teachers were white, 0.9% of teachers were Black, 2.7% of teachers were Hispanic, 2.7% of teachers were Asian. These hiring disparities will not be tolerated. Black students deserve representation in the classroom, and Black, Indigenous, and people of color and white students alike benefit from diverse teaching perspectives. Following the lead of Florham Park and Madison youth organizers, we demand that by the year 2023, the teaching staff include a minimum of 5% Black teachers and at least 10% teachers of color overall. By the year 2026, we demand a teaching staff of at least 10% Black teachers and 20% teachers of color overall. These demands can only be fulfilled by the hiring of actual teachers, not classroom or other aides. We, as the writers and co-signers of these demands and the current Chatham students, would like to be involved in the progress of these demands and hope this can be an open conversation. If the district chooses to create committees to address each of these demands, we would like to have a place in these groups. Our collective liberation is tied to Black liberation. The progress of education and humanity are intrinsically tied to the inclusion of Black voices, histories, triumphs, and struggles. Supporting Black liberation is not only the right and just thing to do, but it is also in the best interest of the school district of the Chatham's mission of educational enlightenment. We want to close by saying that we are making these demands not out of hatred, but out of frustration. We are making these demands because we care about our schools and all their students' experiences. Though we have all graduated from CHS, this community and these schools remain important parts of our lives. We believe the school can reform its curricula, treatment of Black students, and hiring practices, and because we can, we must. Thank you for giving us the space to expand this conversation.
We look forward to working with you in the future.
I know more people raise their hand to come up and speak. Are there additional former students? I think Amy's trying to be polite and see if there's any additional students that want to speak.
I'd like to apologize. I'm reading off my phone. Hello, my name is Kelsey Cohn. I am a rising senior at CHS. I'm here with you tonight behind the camera, as I have been for many meetings this past year. It has likely been brought to your attention that recently Chatham students have been speaking out about the ways our school district upholds systems of racism, and I believe there's no better time than now to continue and expand this conversation, critiquing the ways CHS currently fails to oppose racism in its curriculum. I am passionate about this community, and I know Chatham has always been receptive to progress and inclusivity, and so I hope you will take this conversation as an opportunity for growth and change, and not as a challenge to your values. For most of my peers, the last time they read a book that wasn't by a straight white man for an English class was 9th grade. This is an absolutely unacceptable lack of diversity. I analyzed data on this topic myself, and I would like to share it with you tonight. Out of 73 works pulled from our official high school English curriculums, 63 of them are by white authors. That is 86.3% white written. Only 4 works out of 73 are by Black authors. None of them are by Black women. Over 2/3 alone are by white men. Dismantling systems of racism starts in our youth's education, and high school students need to hear from a more diverse set of voices in our instruction. We rely on our English teachers to show us the voices of our past and present, and to help us understand the perspectives of other members of our global community. Unfortunately, the CHS English department has failed to fill this role. Until English students in all classes are able to access Black literature to the same extent as we are white literature, our English teachers will continue to fill this role. I believe the English department needs to work to develop more diverse syllabuses that expose students to the voices of more people of color and women. Especially in these times of relearning and development, the lack of Black voices in my education is a gaping hole and exposes one way Chatham has failed to support actual diversity and anti-racism. Chatham has a unique position as a school containing progressive and passionate staff members, and I know we can work to be a better community. I hope this call to action poses an excitement rather than an insult, as community conversation is a sign of healthy connection between students and administration. The movement against racism has offered us an opportunity to be self-critical and productive, and we cannot fail to grow right now and still call ourselves supportive of equality and diversity. Failing to represent Black voices in our required readings is negligence. Our community is 91% white, but the worldviews we teach our students don't have to be reflective of the bubble that is our town. In fact, we owe it to our students to seek even harder to educate diversely, in spite of Chatham's homogeneity. We have the power and the ability to allow Chatham students to learn from voices that are sadly largely absent from our daily lives. For the sake of me and my peers, I strongly urge you to seek to rectify this gap in our education by promoting the works of Black writers and diverse authors in every English syllabus. I believe in CHS, and I know this community cares deeply about the integrity of our students' education. However, until the diversity we claim to support is shown in the works we choose to teach our students, Chatham cannot hold integrity in this respect. Now is the time to address our flaws and grow as a community. Let's work to promote the voices of diverse writers. For our community and our students, we cannot fail to take this opportunity. Chatham can and must do better. You owe it to your students. Thank you for your time.
I look forward to seeing you behind the camera again in the fall. If you have it in text, if you want to email it to myself or Dr. LaSousa to be entered into the record. If not, Mr. DeQuella kind of was taking notes. Your call.
I have sent it to the Board of Ed
Oh, okay,
email.
perfect. Excellent, thank you. Then I'll get it as soon as I leave this building.
I used to be a teacher that focused on girls learning in a single-sex environment, and it has not gone unnoticed to me that these young women, I just admire their boldness, their righteousness. It's like the best of youth, and I also think, even though I think the changes that they're mentioning are so important, I feel like there's got to be a little pride in that these young women are so well-spoken and educated and really represent, in a lot of ways, even though I understand you're representing flaws, some good things that are happening in your education as well. Or at least their teachers can be proud, I think, looking at you. Okay, I'm Amy Reale, and I am at 5 Highland, and I'm representing CPAG tonight. Before I do that, just a quick thank you, because I'm here in person. I just really appreciate what I imagine all the extra work is that has gone into the last several months from you who are serving our town, and for you, Dr. LaSousa, and your staff, like all the extra work. I just wanted to thank you personally, since I'm up here. But now I'm representing CPAG, and I'm going to read what our group has. Okay, Chatham CPAG would like to renew our request to be included in the district's reopening plans. Also, we respectfully request that this comment and request be documented in tonight's official meeting minutes. On June 30th, Chatham CPAG, which is the Special Education Parent Advisory Group in Chatham, proactively followed the governor's recommendation to include parents, teachers, and students in restart committees or pandemic response teams by submitting a request to Dr. LaSousa to have representation on any reopening or restart committees. Quickly and disappointingly, our request was dismissed. Chatham CPAG acknowledges the tremendous challenge and pressure placed upon Dr. LaSousa to safely and effectively restart our schools during the continuing COVID-19 pandemic. We understand that the district initiated planning long before schools received any guidance from the New Jersey Department of Education, but also that there is plenty of planning and preparation that remains and will be necessary throughout the year, most likely. It was specifically because of the enormity of the challenges you face and faced that CPAG has been consciously measured in our outreach to the district and board during the past few months. However, we are now in a moment when our best data comes directly from the field. Students, families, and teachers who lived through this unprecedented moment, not solely from the centralized position of the administration. We have exactly one group of students who have lived this and have experiences to share, I'm sure. When we volunteered representatives for your restart committees, we were hopeful that you would see the long-term advantages of directly collaborating with special education students and families. We can't think of a better time to partner with Dr. LaSousa and the Board of Education, because we all want to see our children succeed in the fall and beyond. Special education families should have a direct, authentic voice in the planning for the difficult months ahead. Transparent decisions, especially in regards to our already struggling and vulnerable learners in both general education and special education, will strengthen those approaches and serve families best. If there are special education teachers at each grade level or families taking a part in these plans or work groups, please just let us know. And I know you can't respond, but I'll end with a question that would you be willing to reconsider our request to participate and offer to partner with you and the board? Thank you for your time and attention. And I will also just say to any district families watching, please look out for a very, very brief survey in your inbox by the end of the week from Chatham CPAG. Thanks.
Since Amy just asked, how many people are listening? All right, very good.
Glad I wore my earphone.
Zoom.
Good evening. My name is Cheryl McBride, and I live at 22 Talmadge Avenue. I just want to talk about a couple of quick issues. I didn't write anything formal. Looking around the room, I counted, and I could have missed people from my spot, but I counted 28 people in this room. I know that classes are 20 to 25 people. I want you to imagine putting all but 3 of us into a classroom. I also noticed that in the first hour, 4 people removed their masks for one reason or another, other than for taking a drink. I didn't count the 2 people I saw take a drink. So if we're talking about putting all these people in a classroom for 4 hours keeping masks on, is that a realistic expectation? Just posing the question. Also, I want to support the demands read here tonight by the youth who want an anti-racist education. I hope that COVID does not get used as an excuse to derail that by saying we've got other things to focus on, because that has been the excuse of privileged whites decade after decade after decade, century after century. So those are my 2 things, and thank you for your time.
Public commentary? Anybody else? There's another opportunity at the end if something, anybody else? No, okay.
Hi, Joe Bazralian, Fairfax Terrace. I always start by thanking you for doing all that you do every day, probably on the board, every minute, the administration. Thank you for your commitment. You know, thank you, Ms. Critchley-Weber, for reading my statement. I have my email, I have a couple different things to say. How dare the colonists demand freedom from the British Empire? How dare people for hundreds of years demand an end to things like slavery? How dare they demand that? How dare women spend almost 100 years or 50 years from Seneca Falls to when women eventually got the vote in the early 20th century? How dare they demand that right to vote? How disrespectful of them to do that. How dare parents of children who were working 50, 60, 70 hours a week with no labor laws, how dare those parents demand that children not be forced to vote? How dare people demand public education in this country available to all? How dare adults who worked 2 jobs, 16 hours a day, 7 days a week with no right to walk off the job, how dare they demand that they not be attacked in all sorts of ways to get back on the job? How insolent of those people to demand a basic element of justice. You know, if something comes along that it's not a comfortable package for us, we have to look into why that isn't comfortable for us. Maybe the canon of history that we read in the America that we love, and I do love American history, and I do love the American canon, maybe it's not complete. Maybe by wanting something to come in a perfect package that's comfortable for us, it'll never come along. And by saying we want it to be just so, it really means we don't want to do very much about the situation. I strongly support this petition for true curriculum enhancements, for true anti-racism training. If anti-racism isn't a word that means a lot to you right now, you read up on it. You can't be either a racist or not a racist. There really never was such a thing as not a racist. And I thought I was not racist until pretty recently. So read How to Be an Anti-Racist, because it's something really different and proactive. And it's something that truly fulfills the American dream that we've had all this time. To be a practicing anti-racist is to love and hope for America and to work to make us better and more inclusive of all. If you feel defensive about these very American principles of self-improvement and learning and critical thinking and fairness, if you feel defensive that those aren't American principles, I mean, look into that. Read White Fragility. White Fragility is a book by Rob DiAngelo. If you feel that people are immature or just expecting too much, listen to the presentations that occurred, even just the first half of the presentations that are available online. You know, we all, I think probably most of us have children in the district. We want better for our children. We may love America, but we know we want the United States to be better for our kids. And we are in a privileged, powerful position to make it better. By genuinely embracing the three tenets of this petition, I think we will do the American thing, not something that the nation has always done, but we will do what our ideals call for us to do. I'm so ashamed, actually. I am ashamed in a way that it's taken me, what am I, 40, almost 49, taken me really only until the last 5 years to start self-educating on this topic. And it's taken me just till now, following the leadership of the young people, to come in and speak on this topic. I am ashamed of that, but I also feel energized that I have the opportunity to do this, thanks to the bravery given to me by others. So thank you to the students. They are leaders. We are so fortunate to live in a nation where we have people who understandably, and including me, do not like what's going on and care enough to bring it to us and to give us solutions. So thank you to the students. And thank you to all those who have an open mind and continuously want to self-educate and learn. We're always at a historic moment in our nation. I think now, even just sitting on this board, sitting in this administration, is an unparalleled opportunity to take what we've just been given, the gut-wrenching, pained, and educated thoughts of so many young people. We can turn that into something, and hopefully have additional people join the board of that. We should expand the Board of Education and have more voices and active volunteers to help. So if there's any opportunity for someone like me to help, all I can promise you is that I'm a really energetic reader and an open-minded person, always trying to be better. I'd love to assist in any way and volunteer in any capacity someone may think that I could be helpful along with other volunteers. So thank you all. But most importantly, thank you to the incredible students who've helped me come out here tonight and who've made this discussion possible.
Hello, my name is Tegan Wakiki. I also live at 22 Talmadge Avenue, and Tegan Wakiki. I'd just like to take a quick moment to say that the demands being made that our schools improve in some ways start discussing issues of anti-racism is needed. It's not just an abstract thing. These mindsets, I've seen it, lead to behaviors that aren't violently racist, but still perpetuate racial stereotypes and divide people in a racial manner. It's something that that I've seen happen, and I'm ashamed that I didn't speak out about it, but I'm trying to do that now, and I'm not naming names, that's not what this is about. It's an actual issue. It's not an abstract thing. It's something that I've seen. It's something that's probably happened to students of color in our schools, because ignorance, it leads to people not understanding the struggles of those they are ignorant about, and that will lead to them being insensitive because they don't understand it. Whether or not they're trying to be racist, their behavior ends up being racist. It's something that is occurring in our schools, but it's not always as open and explicit as drawing a swastika even. It's smaller than that. It's conversations between two people that they don't think anyone else can hear. And that stuff, isn't going to be addressed by just announcements about it. You have to actually break it down in a classroom and show them why those mindsets are wrong. It's not something that can be solved with what we're doing now, because what we're doing now is in many ways causing that. One of the examples that was mentioned at the Chatham for Black Lives rally on Saturday was students chanting the name of Bob Ewell, a fictional character in the book To Kill a Mockingbird. Now, that character is incredibly racist. He calls for the lynching of a black man, and he perpetuates just a general attitude of racism and bigotry. Yet, despite To Kill a Mockingbird's message that goes against racism, students still came away from that thinking that that type of behavior was okay. And it's not just as direct as that, it's smaller stuff too. And it's an issue that does not reflect well on Chatham as a community. It does not reflect well on our desire to be more inclusive. It does not reflect well on our ideals that people are treated fairly here. And it's a problem that will continue to persist unless you start to do something about it. Thank you for your time.
I just wanted to say one more thing. The talk about separating people and diversity and all this stuff, the very politicians who talk about this are the ones who categorize people as being black, or white, or Italian, or Muslim, and that's the problem. We don't look at each other as individual human beings because we're led by so many of the people out there talking to us that this interest group needs to be recognized and this interest group to be recognized. Instead of looking at a person and saying, that person's a person, and I recognize and appreciate that person because he's a person, not because he's black or white, or he's Italian or Irish. This is what carries on this whole problem that we have of, call it racism, call it all kinds of names. The whole thing is that we have politicians who are constantly categorizing people and trying to appeal to people on the basis of a categorization. And people don't think in terms of the whole. They're an African American, they're an Italian American, they're a Jewish American. But nobody ever says, I'm an American. And that's where our problem is, that we think of each other as parts of a group rather than as parts of a nation. I'm 79 years old. I can honestly say I grew up without a racist bone in my body. When I was a kid, my favorite baseball player was Jackie Robinson. Not because he was a black guy, because I was a big Dodger fan. He was the best player on the team. I happen to gravitate toward mostly black artists when it comes to music. Not because they're black artists. I do a lot of writing and I'm very involved in the jazz scene. And I don't look at the players as to whether they're white or black, whether the music is white or black. I look at it as good music or bad music. And that's the way I've always looked at people, as people. And I'm just so sick and tired of hearing this rhetoric that goes on and on and on and on and on about racism and this, that, and the other thing. If people would just look at people as people, that's all you have to teach them in school, is that they're individuals and that they're human beings and that they are equal in the eyes of God. And if other people make fun of them, they should be strong enough not to be succumb to that kind of talk. That somebody on a college campus today talk to their teachers the way I talked to my teachers when I was in college, they're kicked out of school. Because I disagreed with a lot of my history teachers. But I was allowed to disagree with them, and I was allowed to state my opinion, and I didn't have a bunch of people picketing me, and I didn't have a bunch of people saying I shouldn't be there, and that my opinion is not worth a word, the words that I say. And that's the problem today. We have tried to shield our kids from being offended. They're not allowed to grow up anymore. They get participation trophies. What kind of a world are we in? I just don't understand it. And that's why I came tonight, because I live in a country that is not recognizable.
Public comments? Thank you.
Still working on math.
We're so polite here. Good evening. Just a few words. If I go on too long, please, stop me. Okay. Oh, my name is Paul Johnson. Thank you. Yes, Paul Johnson. So I guess what I would say is that it's an old saying that I learned years ago, that the more a monster eats, the hungrier it gets. So I would think twice before giving in to the mob, because once you give in and you satisfy their demands, a week or two later there are going to be some new demands that you're going to have to deal with. So I would say just be careful about that. I don't have to tell you, but race has had a rather long and tortured history in this country. And although we can find ways to improve, as Ms. Williams can attest to, we have gone a long way to solving this problem in this country. I mean, we don't have to use the Obama example, but just throughout society, you can clearly see that the country is much different than it was in the 1960s when I was born. So I would, given that we've gone a long way to solving it, I think we should try not to unsolve it. I imagine most of the people in this room has probably heard of Nelson Mandela. Nelson Mandela, as you probably know, he's known mostly for fighting apartheid in South Africa. It's a system not dissimilar to the Jim Crow segregation system we had here in the United States through the latter half of the 19th century and the first half of the 20th century. And so in fighting it, the system in South Africa, he was eventually imprisoned in the 1960s. While I was in college in the 1980s, the students also were interested in fighting apartheid in South Africa. So you had shanty towns on campus, you had students petitioning the university to divest from South Africa. You had students basically, telling you don't drink Coca-Cola because Coca-Cola is involved in South Africa. I mean, it was a full court press we had there. And you also saw that the U.S. Congress was also involved in putting pressure in South Africa through sanctions they passed in the 1980s. And ultimately, it all worked. In 1990, Nelson Mandela was freed. Apartheid came to an end, and about 4 years later, he became President of South Africa. Now, I raised the issue of South Africa here to tell you because today in Africa there is actually slavery going on. Countries like Mauritania and Niger. And in my judgment, however bad apartheid was, I think slavery is worse. But strangely, no one says anything about it. And I think the reason for that is that the enslavers in Africa are not whites, and they're mostly Arabs. I think the conclusion you might draw is that the opposition to apartheid was really had to do with the whites in power rather than the blacks who were being oppressed. And so we have here in the United States today that the Black Lives Matter movement, and it's come to my conclusion, and I think at least one other person in this room agrees, that it has very little to do with black lives. Because of the United States, again, history of racial oppression, slavery and segregation, there was shame that came along with it. And I think the political left has chosen to weaponize that shame against America. And we see that today with the tearing down of statues, not just the Confederacy, but they've gone out to Jefferson and Washington. Even Frederick Douglass is not safe. I just think it's something we probably we should take a long look at that. This is really an attack on America and its culture, and really has very little to do with the uplifting of blacks, but really just sort of the assaulting of whites. In short, I think many of us are being played. So I would, as I wrap up, I would just say, just be very careful. I mean, we could always make improvements to our curriculum, what we teach our students, and that's always up for debate, but please do not just give in to the mob for the sake of thinking you're going to quiet them down, because you will not. Thank you.
Because everybody in the room has already spoken except for Ed. Ed, did you have a comment? No? I just want to make sure. No, we went through the whole room. No, everybody's good. Okay, so we're going to close the public commentary section, and then I'm going to make a comment. But first, most of the conversation was around curriculum and making change and school environment. So I would definitely like Dr. LaSousa to respond first before I make a comment, as he is the lead education officer in the district. So I'm going to pass it over to you, Dr. LaSousa, to respond, and then I will make a comment after that.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Weber. I'm a former social studies teacher also, and my doctorate is in the history of education. So to answer Kelsey, I view these conversations as opportunities, and having conversations like this and hearing commentary like this is helpful to getting to a better place. So I'll repeat something that I said in the front of the meeting, which is this school district strives to make sure that our schools are safe spaces and inclusive environments, and that all students feel not just safe, but excited and good about learning here. And that necessarily means that we have to be sure to eliminate or avoid or not perpetuate or not ignore any practice that makes a student feel otherwise. So I would hope that everyone in the room can agree that any organization like ours can do better, and that having a goal or a guidepost of treating every child respectfully and in a manner that makes them feel good about coming to school and learning and being a better person and connecting with others is a good goal. And we can agree to that, and we can take recommendations or demands or requests and look at them thoughtfully and try to move forward. So on that count, let me say first that we have processes in place to evaluate and absorb and digest and analyze requests, recommendations, suggestions, demands, whatever you want to call them. They involve committees of the Board of Education. They involve other professionals in our school district. They involve ongoing conversations, sometimes newly formed committees to help cast a wider net and bring in more folks. So I think that that's what we would be doing with these. I'm not going to try to go down the several pages and address every bullet right now. I will say something about each of the three categories, though. So the first set of demands essentially is training. I'll tell you that almost 1 year ago, I was at a presentation by someone from the University of Pennsylvania on equity and a consortium across New Jersey to look at issues just like these. I didn't move forward with that opportunity at the time. Since then, one of our members of the curriculum committee, Ms. Clark, has referenced another expert from another institution. Ms. Chase has been looking at training opportunities for staff. This conversation just tonight is an example of why training is good, because these are complex issues, and we all could benefit from additional training in how to discuss issues of race and sensitive matters like these. So just broad brush, I can tell you that the district has already been contemplating training in the area of how to discuss race and talk about anti-racism and other topics like this. The second big bucket here has to do with curriculum. We, as someone mentioned earlier, I think Ms. Kenny, that we had our supervisor of English Language Arts and our supervisor of Social Studies in at one of our recent meetings. We have tried to make strides in diversifying the type of authors that we're using in our classrooms, try to make them more representative of our society and of different perspectives. That's not to say we're finished with that work, but that work has definitely been going on, and Ms. Rocco will come to an upcoming meeting and get into that in a little bit more depth. Ditto with social studies. We've used teaching tolerance, I can tell you, in the past. And as someone who's a former social studies teacher, I have no problem saying that there's always curriculum, or there are always resources to investigate, and there are always ways to enhance and improve what we're doing. So we're also interested in that. And then finally, we get into staffing, as Mr. Maurer also commented in the public commentary. I can tell you that this is a statewide issue. It's a concern for the New Jersey Department of Education. I was in a meeting earlier this school year with someone named Tanisha Davis, who is the director of recruitment and licensing or something along those lines at the NJDOE. Right now, they are trying to improve the pipeline of people of color who are in schools of education, undergraduate and graduate, because they're underrepresented there. And so as a result, many school districts struggle to attract teaching candidates because there aren't very many to be had just from the standpoint of supply, which results, of course, in many districts having underrepresentation in certain areas in terms of people of color. I can tell you that our administrative team is not 100% white. That's not a fault of the author of this document. It's has something to do with the New Jersey Smart Upload and our administrative roster, so we have to address that. But we also have talked about this for a couple of years now. This year, Ms. Grant, who runs our recruitment programs, was set to broaden the number of colleges and universities she tries to recruit from, because we recognize that some of the colleges and universities that we rely on historically are not yielding maybe as broad a range of candidates as we would like. That all got kind of scuttled with COVID because most of the teaching, the job fairs and all of that happened in the spring at these places. But we were planning to go to places like William Patterson and Montclair and Rutgers and try to enhance the way we are recruiting teachers for teaching here. So just to say that in all three of these areas, we always want to be growing, and I have no I look forward to future conversations about a whole bunch of what's here. I can go on off of this topic, Ms. Weber, and address some of the other questions that came in, or if you want me to pause here, I can do that and come back to some of the other issues that were raised.
Yeah, if you wouldn't mind just pausing for a moment so I can stay on track on the same topic and give an opportunity for the board, and then you can go back to some of the other items if you don't mind. So just very briefly, I listened to the entire Saturday Black Lives Matter. It was well organized, it was well attended. I think it was a great step forward, for people in Chatham that want to be more inclusive, they want to be more just, and they want to have a better community overall. It's upsetting to hear some of the things that some of the students say as a parent, as a human, so I'm sorry that you feel that way, felt that way, not supported, not protected. Obviously, we need to do better in that area. We all need to do better, not just the school, but the entire community. We all need to do better. We don't have all the answers, but my favorite speaker of the weekend was Miss Ari Price, and we don't have all the answers, but I'm going to speak for myself. My liberation is bound up in yours, and we need to work together. And I hear you. So many speakers had said, I'm tired of being tired. I get it. I hear you. That resonated with me. With that being said, in order to move forward, as Dr. LaSousa said, we take all of these issues very seriously, and we have a process in place to make modifications to curriculum. We have committees. We have many of the board members will sit on these committees along with other educators in the district, parents, parent representation. So what we do is we circle back, we talk about it as a committee, we bring in the experts that we need, and then we report out at public meetings. As Dr. LaSousa said, we're going to have two of the experts in the district, the social studies and our English language arts supervisors come in. I think one of the first steps to making appropriate changes to a curriculum is to understand our current curriculum and then move forward from there. So Dr. LaSousa, I know Ms. Kenny, who heads up curriculum, has asked you, and I have also, to try and make arrangements for both of those supervisors to come in. And I hope that everyone in the room is able to attend or at least listen, and I hope the 168 folks will also attend that meeting, because it's a great opportunity to learn the curriculum, ask the questions, see where we can improve. We can all do better. So I look forward to that presentation to expand a little bit on our current curriculum. Just to stay on this topic, I just wanted to open it up to any other board members that had anything they want to share or add or dissent on. Mr. Ryan?
Yeah, thank you. I did attend the presentations on Saturday. Unfortunately, I was with my son, who was very young, and he was a little upset by some of the language and the music that was being played before the presentations. And once it began to rain, he started having a fit, and we had to leave. But I did watch the rest of the presentations when I got home, and it very enlightening to hear some of our former students, the poise that you've demonstrated through the pain that you've had. And, I think most of us, all of us here on the board, are very sorry that any student goes through any of those issues. I have a nephew who's an African American, and I also have a nephew that's on the police force here in Chatham. So I have and luckily, when I went to college, I teach my sons to always look for something that you don't know anything about, and try to take a course or get involved in a topic that you know so little about. And when I practiced that myself, I did actually take an African American literature course, and I think we can benefit here in the district from poetry from Phyllis Wheatley, and beautiful literature that comes from that community. I think it'll be helpful, and this is a growing experience for all of us. We do need to be receptive to different folks that need to speak with us. about some of these topics and be inclusive. And I think we're doing a pretty good job. We could always do better. And I hope we can move forward in, as broad a range as possible of information and perspectives. We do need to balance. I think somebody talked about American exceptionalism. We shouldn't lose track of that either. We could do both. We're smart enough. We have the right people in place. We'll get information from different perspectives, and we can accomplish both. There's no reason to believe that one has to substitute for the other. That's it.
Thanks, Mike. Any additional comments?
Yeah, I'd just like to say I'd like to thank, as Amy Reale said, I'm very impressed with all the people that came in and spoke. It gives us, especially hearing the young voices, about what your perspectives are sitting there versus here. It's important for us to. So I know it's hard to come to these meetings. I find it hard to come to these meetings myself. But I want to thank you for coming and everyone for giving us your thoughts, and because it gives us a more complete picture in terms of helping the administration guide us through all of this.
Thank you, Robin. Anything else good? No other?
I just want to say, prior to this meeting a few weeks ago, we did have a curriculum meeting that was really lengthy, and our supervisor of social studies and language arts really walked us through kind of the current curriculum. There was discussion about removing some text from the curriculum and adding some others in. I myself really pushed PD, professional development, for our teachers and staff to become more comfortable, to have uncomfortable conversations and do it successfully to educate our students. Another thing that I asked our administration to explore is about privilege and white Christian privilege, and where we learn that in the curriculum so our students have a better understanding. And we definitely focused on author diversity, K through 12. So these conversations are happening. We hear you. We're not ignoring you. And I'm a firm believer that nothing changes if nothing changes. So we are going to take some baby steps, and then we're going to take some big steps, and we're going to do it very carefully and methodically. So we hear you, and thank you for coming.
Thank you. Mike, Brad, you good? No? Okay. Dr. LaSousa, would you mind picking up? Oh, I'm sorry. Matt's going to. Sorry, Mike.
I've been on this board for, I think, 13 years, something maybe more. So this is the third time we've been through a situation like this, where there's incidents that happen in America that lead to the call for change and the demands for change. And unfortunately, there's an old adage that says, the true content of a person's character comes when nobody's watching. And I've seen this happen twice before, where we had opportunities to take advantage of incidents in America that really highlight race and gave us an opportunity to improve on race relations in America. But for some reason, that momentum gets lost and declines, and we have not been successful in taking advantage of the opportunities to improve our society. So I ask the young people who came in today, is you need to do things if you really want to make change, and you really want to help us make change, is that you can't allow the momentum and the opportunity to help change in America towards achieving the goals that you're all up here talking about today. I think we all have the same goals, but you need to not allow what I've seen happen in the past, which is a momentum builds and then unfortunately it goes away. So to really impact change in life, to really impact change in society, to really impact change here in Chatham, is that we need to continue this conversation for all of the years out, not allow it to die. So I think what's most important from what you have all done today is to hopefully establish a mechanism for continued conversation, continued support, continued highlighting of issues, and don't allow it to die. So I would ask for you I would love for you guys to come back in a year from now, and maybe it's 6 months, whatever it is, but continue to talk to us about things that you're hearing, things that you see are working, things that are improving. That will help us shape our decisions, our curriculum, our things that we can support in order to support the continued development of positivity. But again, the most important actions in life are when people aren't looking. So continue to stand up for what you believe in, continue to engage in conversation, and continue to challenge us as a Board of Education to become better. So if we're better and you help us be better, then we'll make ourselves a much better community.
Thank you, Matt. Any additional comments? No. I'm going to pass it back to Mike then to respond to some of the other items during the public commentary.
Let me try to hit these roughly in order. Mr. Krieg raised the issue of whether we're focusing on the quality of instruction as we're preparing for virtual learning again, whether it's in the beginning of the year or sometime after the year begins. The answer is yes. And Ms. Chase is working closely with our supervisors, who are in turn drawing on our teachers who are preparing lessons and preparing for the year so that we have a better experience this time around than we did in the spring when we were rushed out on such short notice. Ms. Schwartz asked about the two public health officials. So yes, we have two different municipalities. So there's a public health officer for Chatham Borough who's based out of Westfield, and there's a public health officer for Chatham Township. He's based out of Bloomfield. They have been very communicative, easy to work with. Like I said, I talked to the township official today. I have a call scheduled at 2 o'clock tomorrow with the borough official. They've been reasonable in all respects and responsive in all respects, and they are guiding us just like they did back in March and just like they have in past years when we have other communicable diseases that we have to deal with on occasion. So they've been great to work with, and hopefully that'll continue. I'm sure it will. Ms. Jones asked about kindergarten, half-day kindergarten. This is one of the big topics of discussion between the K-3 principals and other administrative staff. I can say definitively that I think we can all probably agree in the scope of virtual instruction, it's a little bit easier to do at high school where students tend to be independent and can log onto a machine on their own and can self-advocate. It's not so hard. It's not so easy to do for 3, 4, and 5-year-olds. So we know that it's critical that our youngest learners are in school as much as possible, and we're working through as many issues as we can, as fast as we can to address those. And as soon as we come to some firm conclusions, we will share that with the public. And obviously the board will be involved in all those discussions before we get there. Mr. Bazralian, I'm halfway through reading Kendi's book, so that's on my nightstand right now. Ms. Reale, I apologize if I didn't give you enough of an explanation. When I emailed you, I've been struggling to keep up with my emails, to be perfectly honest with you, over the past few weeks. When New Jersey issued its guidance document on June 26th, some districts chose to form brand new committees. Other districts, like this one, decided to continue the teams and the committees that were already knee-deep in work and leverage existing structures to gather input from key constituencies. So what that means here is that I've asked principals to be looping in their association representatives and their PTO representatives. At the building level, I've asked Vin to reach out to CPAG, which I think he's done. I'm dealing with the presidents of the association. So we're structuring the committee in a way that leverages what the existing structures already were, so that we don't reinvent the wheel and make the most efficient use of time. So I just would encourage you to continue to dialogue with Dr. D'Elia, and that way we can incorporate as much input as possible from the special education community, which of course is also high up on our priority list as we enter into the next school year. Ms. McBride, great question. Is it realistic, given the number of people here, what classrooms will look like? This is why we're relying on our public health officials and looking at public health guidance, because we all probably have a different level of comfort when we're inside facilities, and we all have different opinions. So thank you. And I think that's everyone unconnected to the issue of race and anti-racism and social justice.
Could you just reply, the book that Mr. Lyons spoke about?
People's History of the United States.
Yes.
Yes.
We've used, I mean, you can answer it better, but this has come up before, and we use that as one of many books for different voices. So his question was, do you use that book? I mean, the short answer is yes, but it's in context with, many other voices to hear a perspective of opinions and voices, and you could probably answer that better, but the short answer is yes, that book is used.
Yes, I think that work is also used to explore really what historiography is, which is which facts are authors selecting, how are the decisions of authors of history affecting our understanding of history. And so you have obviously different authors are taking different perspectives on a certain historical event or issue. So People's History of the United States is like an economic interpretation of the Constitution, which is another famous one in the canon of historiography. But the purpose is to instruct students on how to see multiple perspectives, and it's read and used alongside other works for that purpose.
Thank you for answering that again. It came up at length at a previous meeting. Okay, so in the interest of time, does any other board member have any additional comments? Or Dr. LaSousa, you're complete at your answers. Very good. So I'm just going to move on to the action items. And just a reminder, there's another opportunity for public comments at the end. And Mike, let me know if any others come in via email. So moving on to personnel. Anne, would you mind moving personnel items?
Nope, I'd like to move action items 1 through 9 on the regular agenda as, A 1 through 9, as well as A 10 through 12 on the addendum.
1 through 12. Okay, great. Thank you, Mike. Peter, you heard Mike second, right? Yes. Okay. Sorry. I'm having trouble hearing tonight.
Mike, what's considered phase 1 for the coaches' salaries? How many phases are there?
There are 3 phases. Phase 1 is Phase 1 involves temperature screenings, reduced squads, or at least reduced groups of students at one time, no shared equipment. I believe the athletes need to wear masks unless they're doing something strenuous and related to conditioning. So that's phase 1, sorry. And the NJSIA did just release on Friday an update to delay the commencement of the fall season.
For about a month, right?
Yes.
Roughly phase 2, when they start the practice on September 14th?
I believe that if they have not engaged in the phase 1 beforehand, they have to start phase 1 at that point. So a future topic for us, and it may lead to a board meeting before our next scheduled board meeting, is we may have sports other than the ones that are on the addendum who want to begin doing phase 1 when our season would have begun, like around August 10th or August 15th. And that way they would then do about 2 weeks or so of the phase 1, assuming we're still in phase 1 and all this holds. Then they'd be in the virtual period before the season begins, and then they would start, I believe, around September 14th in phase 2. But I can confirm all that with our athletic director once we kind of learn more about this.
And he's working directly with the NJSIA
Yes.
contacts?
Yep.
I knew the answer, I just wanted to say it out loud. Does anybody else have any questions on any personnel items? We'll continue to keep a close eye as we come closer to the school on filling any gaps that we might have in our personnel needs. Peter, would you mind?
Sure. Agenda items A1 through 9, and on the addendum 10, 11, and 12. Mr. Gilfillan? Yes. I'll come back to Ms. Chigarelli. Ms. Clark?
Yes.
Ms. Kenny?
Yes.
Mr. Ryan?
Yes.
Mr. Smith? Yes. Mr. Valenti? Yes. And Ms. Weber?
Yes.
In the essence of time, I'm going to record Mrs. Ciccarelli as an abstain, so it passes 701.
Okay, that's fine, thank you. Moving on to Finance and Facilities, Mr. Gilfillan.
I'd like to move action items B1 through 11 on your regular agenda, addendum B12 and 13, which is on your addendum, and then also the ad lib B14.
B14 is the Performing Arts Booster donation.
Just a couple of donations. One, I always love these, the General Mills box tops for education. It's an amount of $18.80. Doesn't sound like a lot, but it takes a lot of effort to get to that dollar number, so you have to thank them very much. And then last but not least, a PTO district cabinet donation in the amount of $5,000 to be used at the superintendent's discretion.
Did somebody second? Oh, thank you. Thanks, Bradley. Does anybody have any questions for Peter or Matt or anybody on the Finance Committee? No? Oh, go ahead, Peter.
Agenda items B1 through 11, the addendum of 12 and 13, and the added resolution B14 from the booster donation. Mr. Gilfillan? Yes. Ms. Ciccarelli? Yes. Ms. Clark? Yes. Ms. Kenny?
Yes.
Mr. Ryan?
Yes.
Mr. Smith? Mr. Valenti? And Ms. Weber. Agenda items pass 8-0.
Yes, great, thank you. Curriculum, Ms. Kenny?
I'd like to move action items C1 to C10 for vote.
Second.
Questions for Dr. LaSousa on any of the curriculum items, or Ms. Kenny or anybody else on curriculum? Mike, you took off the field trips item, right?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. It is unlikely that we'll be taking any field trips this year, correct?
Correct. Well, yeah.
Well,
As of right this second, it looks that way. We did reschedule the 8th grade, trip into the fall initially. We have to deal with that. That's the one big one that.
Okay. And do we have a deadline as to when we have to make any determination?
I forget now what the details are in terms of postponement or.
Okay.
I don't remember those details. I have to check with Mr. Horsky.
Do you mind circling back with Lada, who chairs curriculum on that? Lada, do you mind following up on that? Sure. Thank you. Yeah.
On that trip, so
That wasn't by accident that I punted that to you. Excellent. Any additional questions on curriculum? No? Seeing none, Peter?
C1 through C10. Mr. Gilfillan? Yes. Ms. Ciccarelli? Yes. Ms. Clark? Yes. Ms. Kenny? Yes. Mr. Ryan?
Here I have yes on all with the exception of C3, which I'll vote no on.
Okay. Mr. Smith? Yes. Mr. Valenti? Yes. And Ms. Weber?
Yes.
C1, 2, 4 to 10 pass 8-0. C3 passes 7-1.
Excellent, thank you. Now over to Mr. Ryan for policy.
I'd like to move agenda items D1 for a vote.
This is a first reading, correct, Mike? Thank you. Does anybody have any questions on any of those? All of our policies, incidentally, are posted on our website, if anybody wants to read any of them. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Very good. There you go, Peter.
Duly noted, agenda item D1 passes 8-0. In the matter of offering, since Mrs. Ciccarelli is the personnel chair, and you want to cast a vote on agenda items A1 through A12 that you moved?
Oh, yeah, sorry, yes, my vote is yes.
Duly noted that all the A items pass 8-0.
Okay, very good. Thank you. We put you down as an abstention for temporary purposes, Ann.
Sorry.
No worries.
I was going to call it.
No worries. So board business, it's pretty much been reopening all the time. That's what we're focusing on right now. Safety is paramount. We do get a lot of emails from parents, and we're reading every one of them. There's just so many, there's I mean, I talk to Mike almost every day or every other day, and every decision creates 5 more questions. So we're working on it, and that's all I've got for board business. It's just reopening all the time, and we're doing our best to get there and not be more disruptive than we have to families and students. Does anybody else have any additional items regarding board business? Nope. Okay, so we have just a quick question, Mike. We do not have an executive session tonight, correct? Okay, very good, thank you. So we have our second opportunity for public commentary. If you wouldn't mind just going up to, thanks, Connor. Going up to the mic, introducing yourself. You did have something to say. No. Go ahead.
Ed Barmakian, Tappan Chatham. I know I brought this up a few times before. It's probably not that pressing for you guys, but it seems like your meetings are conflicting with the Chatham Borough Council meetings quite a bit. I think this must be the 3rd or 4th time in the last couple of months that you have your meeting at the same time. So I respectfully ask that you try to adjust that so that they're not at the same time.
Peter, do you mind if you and I circle back on that on the meeting calendar? No problem. Yeah, we just needed flexibility. We'll probably be meeting more than is posted just because of the whole reopening. But so Peter, you and I can work on the calendar. Any additional comments? No, seeing none. Okay, then I make a motion to close the public commentary section. We do not have executive session, so I make a motion to close the public meeting. All those in favor? All right, thank you again for everybody for coming out. Really appreciate it.